am going to be reading the first chapter from Into the Breach with You, which is the third book in the Ladies Alpine Society. All four books are in the series are out right now and Kindle Unlimited. And I thought this would be the book out of the whole series that shows a little more of the personalities, because this book is where they actually get to Zermatt. They are actually climbing the mountain in this book. So here we are. It's chapter 1. This is Justine's book, and Justine is, of the four ladies, she is the daughter of a merchant. So she is not of the aristocracy, but they have wealth, so they rub shoulders with the aristocracy sometimes. So this is 1869, Zermatt, Switzerland. Justine Brewer didn't mind a lot of things. She didn't mind the cold. She didn't mind her friends being so in love that they draped themselves endlessly around their sweethearts, or overhearing their whispered saccharine sentiments so often that it made her teeth hurt. But what she absolutely did mind was being forced to sit still for 3 days straight, from the ferry across the channel to the train from Calais to Paris, the train from Paris to Strasbourg, the train from Strasbourg to Zurich, and the donkey ride from Zurich to Zermatt. She was going to crawl out of her bloody skin. As it was, she already wished she were climbing the mountain herself instead of being strapped onto the back of a donkey like a piece of luggage, feeling the cold and observing how the snow gathered on rocks and trees until finally, the valley unfurled, and beyond was the stately, snowy, scooped-out peak of the Matterhorn. It loomed above all other peaks, and on the cold, clear day it glowed with its hard, bright white angles. The donkeys ambled down into Zermatt, the church steeple at the far end lording over the shadowed valley, a pale echo of the mountain beyond. The town itself was not large, but well established. The snow crusted on the rooftops of the wood and slate alpine houses, which were utterly unlike English cottages. They all possessed a tightness and squareness, each window and shutter at right angles. Not a single board leaned even a centimeter out of place. There were few people out on the streets, all wrapped tightly in woolen scarves and hats, barely anything but eyes showing against the chill air. When they finally arrived at their inn, Justine was too impatient to wait for someone to help her down off the donkey. She slid off herself and threw the reins haphazardly. But oh, that air! Nothing had tasted as good as this air, crisp and fresh and cool. She felt like she could drink it. She was even more anxious to run, to feel that air deep in her lungs, to replace all that fetid air of the 3 days' worth of enclosed trains. In front of her, Ophelia and her father, Lord Rascombe, dismounted. Another train of donkeys pulled up behind them, hauling all the luggage and climbing equipment they'd brought from London or picked up along the way. One step closer to the top of the Matterhorn. If she weren't positive Ophelia would get annoyed with her for wandering away, she would have gone on a walk around right then. She stamped on the snow, hearing the cold crunch of it under her boots. Fraulein, a man said to her, indicating the way into the hotel. The building was freshly built, the light-colored boards still smelling of trees. The rugs were new, and Justine thought about how much melted snow these would absorb over the years. Her carpet bag was already waiting at the front desk, along with Ophelia's. Guten Abend, the man at the desk said. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with frothy snow-white hair and a round face. His cheeks were pink, which contrasted with the bright blue ice-chip color of his eyes. Ich bin der Herr Brunner. Good afternoon, Justine said, not understanding a word that was spoken. Instead, she looked around, waiting for Lord Rascombe to speak with the older man. There was a staircase that obviously went up to guest rooms and another doorway that gaped open. Through it, she saw tables and chairs. She pointed, then mimed bringing a fork to her mouth. For eating? The man's eyes brightened and he nodded. Ja, für Essen. It looked pleasant enough, simple accommodation, but that's all they needed. She was looking forward to her simple dresses, the solitary runs, and this delicious, crisp air. No dances, no balls, no dinners, just mountains. Lord Rascombe approached, pulling letters out of his coat pocket. The men spoke in German, which Justine ignored, and instead looked about at the potted plants and the red and yellow painted designs on the exposed beams above her head. Ophelia joined her. Justine pointed upwards. The English never decorate a ceiling. Untrue, Ophelia said, sniffing. All is well? Justine asked. I should like a bath, that's all, Ophelia said. Justine didn't respond because she didn't need to. They'd endured the hell of puberty together, their first menses, for Justine's first blood came as she shared a bed with Ophelia and would have been the most mortifying event in the world had Ophelia not been so drattedly kind about it. And while Justine had received the taunting of Ophelia's older brother Tristan, now thankfully wed and thoroughly besotted with Eleanor, it wasn't as if Justine hadn't given as good as she'd gotten. Until Tristan had told Justine's nickname to his influential friends, and it became a work for the scandal sheets. But it didn't matter to Justine, and Ophelia stuck by her through it all, even though the other girls told Ophelia to cut ties with Justine because of her reputation. Ophelia always told them that Justine was an innocent. In the matters of men, yes, absolutely. In the matters of other mischief, perhaps not. And her older brother Francis, Tristan's schoolmate, was of no help whatsoever. He didn't defend his little sister at all. It didn't help that no matter what kind of gown Justine wore, her slim waist, short stature, and buxom endowments made her look as if she were hoping for a tumble in the hay. The only true resistance to this presumption was to laugh at them, and she did. She had gotten used to needing to be unkind, needing to be loud and forceful, and in one particularly horrifying instance, when she was at her debut, being very well seen so no one could carry her off. I like the red bird motif, Justine said, still staring at the alpine ceiling. It's cheerful. It's bloody, Ophelia said. Justine looked to her friend, anxious indeed to be so judgmental. It wasn't like her. Justine was about to say something when there was a thunder on the stairs and the rest of the Ladies Alpine Society came tearing into view. Eleanor flung herself on Justine while Prudence embraced Ophelia. We've missed you, Eleanor squealed. Their quiet and withdrawn knot-tying genius, Eleanor, was capable of squealing? Marriage had loosened her. Who are you, and what have you done with Eleanor? Justine admonished. But Eleanor moved aside, and Tristan moved in for a hearty embrace, something he had never done before. Puzzled, Justine suffered his affection. Bad news, Tristan uttered the nickname he'd bestowed. Arsehole, she said, the only name he'd ever earned. Tristan laughed and let her go, leaving her to greet Prudence and then have a very awkward handshake with Mr. Moon, their expedition accountant, who was not supposed to be here, but had followed Prudence. Not that Justine would blame him. Prudence was the kind of American goddess embodying all the things Englishwomen wouldn't dare do, smiling at strangers, for one. Prudence was tall and moved easily in her skin with a confidence that even Justine envied. Justine took Prudence's hand and squeezed it. Darlings, it's lovely to see your gorgeous faces. Well, except yours, Tristan. It's abominable as usual. Tristan was considered one of the best-looking men in London. He shared his golden hair and doll-like blue eyes with Ophelia and their mother, as well as an easygoing disposition that was often construed as sweet. But Justine knew what an arsehole he was and had no inclination to stop telling him so. However, Justine continued, a bath is crucial. Where might the bathing facilities be located? Won't you need to unpack first? Eleanor asked. No need, Justine chirped, gesturing to the carpet bags she'd set aside. We have our changes of clothes at the ready. I can show you the way, Prudence said, picking up one of the carpet bags. Follow me. A bath, then a dinner of sausages and potatoes and sauerkraut, and they were in their beds, a small portable iron brazier glowing to keep them warm. Justine shared a room with Ophelia, each in their small beds, and while her friend fell asleep immediately, Justine felt like it was the middle of the afternoon. She was ready for tea and gossip or even a training run. It had been ages since she'd been allowed to move properly. She lit the small oil lamp next to her bed and tried to read, but even her mind was restless. Eleanor had given her a book about Mary, Queen of Scots, which normally would have been interesting, but Justine could not concentrate, not when her body screamed for permission to move. A young lady should go wandering about a hotel in the middle of the night. It wasn't done because it wasn't safe. But she would die if she had to lay still any longer. With a jealous glance at Ophelia's sleeping form, her angelic face arranged like the porcelain dolls her mother gifted her every year, Justine got out of bed. She put on her heavy woolen stockings, her dowdiest dress, meant for climbing mountains in, and an extra shawl that she tied about her shoulders and waist. She pulled on the warm wool-lined slippers and crept out of the room, where she discovered it was very cold indeed. The iron braziers heated the rooms individually, but the passageways were freezing. Justine would need to find a fireplace quickly, and perhaps a dose of local flavors that could help her fall asleep. Was she a nightmare for chaperones? Yes. Was she bad news, as Tristan Bridewell had said so many years ago? Possibly. Would she lose her mind if she didn't wander the Alpine Inn right this minute? Absolutely. Carrying her oil lamp with her down the passage and down the stairs, she followed the heat. It was easy to feel the drafts as they circulated through the building. As she got to the bottom floor where the innkeeper had greeted them, she could feel the warmth emanating from the dining room, where the door was now closed. She followed it, opening the door without thinking what would be behind it. It had been where they ate dinner that night, where breakfast would be served in the morning. It was just a dining room. But when she opened the door, all she could see was a man's shoulders, powerfully built, achingly obvious, outlined by firelight. The man whipped his head around, holding a shirt to his chest. Oh my, Justine breathed, her heart thundering at her discovery. She was anyway unable to move or to quit staring. Recovering from his shock, the man relaxed, pulled the shirt on, and vaguely tucking it in before pulling up the leather braces that had been hanging at his sides. Guten Abend, Fräulein. Justine trailed off. I don't speak German. The man nodded, looked aside for a moment, and then began again, this time in English. Good evening, miss. Do you need something? His accent was clipped, and in the firelight, his lined forehead became even more pronounced as he frowned. Not right. I mean to say, may I help you? Oh, your English is very good, she said, hoping a compliment would somehow make amends for her bursting in on him. Thank you, he said. May I help you? Justine frowned for a second, then realized why he was insisting on helping her. It was the middle of the night, and she was prowling around like a burglar. Oh, do you work here? Yeah, he said with a chuckle. And you do not? No, she said. Then she realized he wasn't wearing socks or shoes, and she was suddenly embarrassed. Justine Brewer, of Bad News Brewer fame, was embarrassed. Then what are you doing out of your bed? He leaned forward, and the light hit him so she could see his features more plainly. And it was awful. He was even better looking than Tristan had ever been. This man had unkempt and unruly blonde curls, far longer than what any Englishman would wear. He had light eyes and a jaw that could cut glass. Of all the damnable things, now she would end up hating him. Handsome men were often atrocious in her experience. But he hadn't seemed to imbue his words with any innuendo. He wasn't mentioning her bed with the idea that he might be getting in it. He was merely asking. How unexpected. I couldn't sleep, Justine said, uncertain as to how to feel suddenly. He blinked and nodded as if it were a substitution for words. Do you not read? What? Was he asking if she was literate? Of course I read, she snapped. But then she realized where she was, a remote town in the mountains. There were likely many people here who did not read. And it was an activity one did to help a person fall asleep. Oh, she was being an arse. Oh, don't be an arse, don't be an arse, she chanted to herself. Then why not read to sleep? Are you shivering? She asked, noticing a tremor as the light caught a billow of his white shirt. Yeah, I'm very cold. Then stand closer to the fire. Are you daft? Without thinking, she pushed him back towards the impressively large decorative iron stove with its open, glowing grate. He let himself be guided, her hands on his shoulders. Justine was very aware of how much taller he was than her, and he stared down at her, amused. I am to help you, he said. I am trying to be of service. Well, you won't be of service to anyone if you catch your death, Justine snapped. Do you not have thicker blankets? He chuckled again, a soft rumble from his chest that was more akin to a cat purring than a man laughing. Why, when I am next to a big fire? The heat was powerful. Already, Justine's forehead prickled with sweat. She dropped her hands from where they had inadvertently started to droop to his chest. Oh dear, it was a firm and solid chest. Not at all like the soft padded London men she was accustomed to chasing her. But then she realized that his clothes were damp. Why are your clothes wet? You asked many questions. I ask one. Will you please answer my one question, and then I promise I will answer whatever question you have. Promise? Justine looked up and blinked at him. She felt strange, like the world had tilted in some way. Was it vertigo from the altitude change? Was she becoming ill? She was likely ill from all her travels, but there was nothing on God's green earth that would persuade her to go to bed now. She felt like she needed to run for a full day to be rid of whatever energy possessed her right now. Fine, what's your question? May I help you? He asked, his words slow and emphasized. Oh, no, I just can't sleep, that's all. She trailed off, not knowing how to describe the sensation in her limbs, so she shook them to demonstrate. Ah, he nodded as if he not only understood her flailing, but could sympathize. He held up his hand. Moment. He padded off into the darkness, and there was something about being able to see the bare bottoms of his feet that made Justine feel as if she were doing the most inappropriate thing possible. Her! Bad News Brewer, who had repeatedly stolen whole bottles of sherry from her parents' wine cellars to consume with Ophelia, getting drunk and playing stupid games as the room spun. Bad News Brewer, who wore two dance cards so that the men who filled the same dance slot could argue or possibly fistfight over who got to have the waltz with her. Bad News Brewer, who once climbed the ancient oak of the Bridewell's London townhouse to dance on the slate tiled roof because stupid Tristan had said she would be too scared. And that same Bad News Brewer was worried that the bottom of a man's foot was too much. What was the world coming to? Get a hold of yourself, she whispered to the giant iron stove. He appeared out of nowhere holding a bottle and two of the tiniest wine glasses in the world. Hold what? Justine shook her head. Nothing. He gave her a confused smile, and Justine was reminded of Prudence, who smiled at every bloody turn of the day because she couldn't stop that facial tic. Bloody Americans and bloody Swiss. But he didn't question her, only raised the bottle and the glasses and said, Brandy. Of course, Justine said, relieved there would be an activity, even if the activity was drinking some kind of alcohol, which had been drilled into her since practically birth that a young lady did not do so in the company of men. And for good reason, because the middle of the night was a strange time, bound by its own rules, populated by its own sounds, and the dictums of day had no business interfering with whatever nighttime prowling discovered, which was precisely why Justine preferred it. The man poured two glasses and handed her one. She accepted it and sniffed at the goldish-looking liqueur. It smelled like apples and honey in the low burn of alcohol. Frankly, it smelled delicious. He held his glass out as a toast. Prost. Bless you, Justine said, knowing it was rude, but he smiled at her. Cheers. She didn't move to touch his glass with hers, though he did with her. She didn't realize it was something she should have done, but she knew for next time that touching glasses was preferred here. She sipped, tasting what seemed like a very nice French apple brandy. Is this from here? She asked. Locally made? He shook his shaggy blonde head. Imported from Calvados. For the English. For you. Justine laughed. Of course the Swiss import French liquor for the English. You like it? She giggled. Oh God, she giggled. Of course. Calvados is excellent. He gestured to the seat near the fire, clearly where he had draped his clothing to dry. Sit, please. She moved towards the chair, but then stopped, her heavy woolen dress swinging against her ankles. Where will you be? He gestured to another chair farther back in the dining room. When he saw her concern, he reassured her. I will bring the chair to the fire. She nodded, taking his glass from him as she sat, giving him the opportunity to use both of his hands to move the chair over. He placed the stiff-backed wooden chair closer to the fire and took his glass from her, taking a hefty swig, nearly emptying it. He looked at her expectantly. You're not saying that I should... She mimed, tossing the glass back as he had done. Yeah, he said, his rumpled golden hair somehow adorable and not at all making her want to hate him for being pretty. Young ladies shouldn't, she protested before feeling very stupid about explaining what proper British ladies did as she sat in a Swiss inn at the foot of the Matterhorn. She was doing the extraordinary. She was full of daring. So with a smile, she tossed back the brandy with a swift motion. The apple liqueur burned delightfully down her throat. He laughed and clapped for her. Brava. He finished his glass and then poured another for both of them. Warms you up for the temperature and for the conversation. I have to warm up for a conversation? She watched the liquor spill into her glass. Maybe my English is not so good after all, he said. I suppose not. I don't even know your name. We should at least be introduced. Was she flirting on purpose? There were so many times she'd been accused of flirting that she didn't even know the meaning of the word anymore. Scandal sheets reported that she flirted if she shook someone's hand or laughed at a joke. She flirted when she did what every other young lady did, but if Bad News Brewer did it, the action was somehow imbued with extra meaning. Do we need names right now? He asked. So I know what to call you better than, oh, you there. Is it? He asked, stretching his legs out in front of him and crossing them at the ankles. And Justine noticed his thighs. She was not a person who noticed men's thighs, but his were powerful and as thick as her waist. This was a man who could build you an inn. Her mouth was unexpectedly dry, so she sipped again at her brandy, steadying her breath. If I know you, then I must treat you as a guest and not as a ghost roaming the hotel at night. He chuckled to himself. I want to be off duty just for these hours. I hadn't thought of it that way. She had never served anyone, never worked. She was obsequious to exactly no one and planned on keeping that way. But to live a life of service, whether a maid in a big home or in a simple Swiss mountain inn, had to take its toll somehow. Then that's fine. Or as my American friend might say, okay. He pulled his chin back and looked at her askance. What does this mean, the two letters together? Justine shrugged, another gesture she wouldn't have used if they had been properly introduced and not been drinking brandy in front of an open grate of an enormous iron stove where she could discreetly admire his very pretty thighs, the open V of his shirt, the way his leather braces clung to his shoulders. No clue, but she says it all the time. I believe it means something like yes, but not as formal or certain of a yes. The man pursed his lips as he looked into the fire, considering the new Americanism. Interesting. I will try it. Maybe it is a useful thing. Yes, but with a circumstance. Exactly. Like, yes, but I have opinions. Okay, he tried it out. She grinned. Okay. He clinked his tiny glass to hers, and the crystal rang out in the dining room, a clear sound that seemed loud enough to raise the dead. Okay.